in New Jersey and in West Virginia. And this is news that you can use from CarEdge. And today, your hosts are, well, myself, Ray, and the lovely F&I goddess herself, Miss Kimberly Klein, ladies and gentlemen. How are you today,
Hi.
Kimberly?
I am so happy to be here. I know that the wonderful Zach is doing business as we
He's
speak. So
he
I'm glad
he's
I'm here.
always doing business.
Indeed he is. Indeed he is. How are you today, Ray?
I am well. I'm back in my apartment
Oh,
in Ventnor. Glad to be home. I was glad to get home late yesterday. As much fun as it was to sit down and do an interview with Fox News in Washington
oh
D.C.
yes.
yesterday, it was equally as fun to actually get back to my apartment.
I'm sure. Well, I can't
Mm,
wait until that comes out. I'm sure we'll all get a link for it, but how fun and
Yes.
exciting that
I
is.
Zach, in his infinite wisdom, even though he's traveling to New York today, he
Mhm.
came up with, well, our first topic for the show today, which
Okay.
is, and I believe I have to share my screen. So we're gonna see if
Let's
I
do it.
that was the wrong button. Uh, so we're gonna hit share screen. Oh my God. Um, Entire screen. And then we're going to click on that. And then we're going to hit share. And we're going to go up
Bam.
here. And this was from Automotive News today. And
Mhm.
this was very interesting, because I worked when initially got into the car business. I represented Dodge and Subaru, but ultimately I found a career with a Nissan dealership outside of Atlantic City, New Jersey. It was Datsun then, and I spent 12 years there. So this is kind of near and dear to my heart because I've seen Nissan go through challenges in the past.
Mhm. Yeah.
Nissan credit rating cut to junk by S&P, with profit sales seen remaining weak. Nissan's profitability will continue to lag behind its competitors for the next 1 to 2 years, Standards and Poor's said, as supply chain issues persist.
Mm.
Um, you know, that's a pretty scary headline when you consider that Nissan is still, I think, considered one of the world's preeminent um, automobile manufacturers. Maybe not to the same degree as BMW or Mercedes Benz
Yeah.
or even Honda or Toyota.
Yeah,
But
it's funny you say that. I also, when I started into this industry in 2002, I started with Nissan, and Nissan has always been a little bit near and dear to my heart too. And I wish that they would bring back the Xterra. Yeah, it was a gas guzzler, had some issues, but man, I love that vehicle, and it got me through some big Cleveland snowstorms. I love the Xterra. But yeah, Ray, getting moved down in the credit rating to junk,
yes,
not a good thing. Not a good look for Nissan right now.
no, and they have had some difficulties since Goshen was arrested and then
Mhm.
eventually escaped Japan.
Yeah.
And they've been in several different alliances. They were affiliated with Renault at some point in time, and they've just had a number of issues. But I mean, I can honestly tell you, I started with them in 1977, and and and
A little bit
represented
before me, huh?
yeah, a little bit, and represented the brand for 12 years till 1989.
Uh-huh.
And one of the key um, vehicles that they came out with at the time was
Yeah.
the Pathfinder, and it was that was a pretty remarkable vehicle at the time. I remember a commercial where people were driving it through South America, going all off road. There's a kid in the back seat with an ice cream cone and the ice cream ball, But it was just it was a vehicle that was well before its time as far as off road capabilities and being built on a truck chassis and they did a lot of innovative things. The Z car, and then when
Yeah.
they brought it back again. So it's disturbing to me, from having cut my teeth in the business representing the brand, to see them struggling again. Yeah, they've had issues, and And like every manufacturer, they've made mistakes along the way, and some of the cars they brought out didn't necessarily make a lot of sense. I mean, before you represented Nissan, I mean, there were vehicles like in the late 70s, early 80s, the F10, and it was just one of the ugliest vehicles I'd ever seen and driven. And as somebody said, I think it was the service manager at the dealership, he said the F10 is the answer to the question that nobody ever asked. It
Yeah.
was just it made no sense at all. That and the Stanza wagon
The
and
stanza.
oh, I mean, just some incredibly bad vehicles over the course of their history.
Hey, yeah, and I gotta say the Juke. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. I think
Yes,
that the Juke got the worst looking vehicle award. It was the ugliest vehicle, wasn't it? I think so.
it still is. They've had their challenges, but they've had some real winners.
They
You
have.
know,
I loved my Murano. I had a 06.5 Murano that I loved, and I
yes,
loved the Xterra. They did have some winners, Ray.
they really did. The Z car. There were just a bunch of good cars. The Maxima
Oh,
was
yeah. Okay. Yes. Let's go
was
back
and
to the
always,
Maxima.
yeah, that's always been a wonderful car.
Yeah.
So to see them struggling right now, that's really a little unnerving, at least for me. I wanted to pull something up from the chat if I can,
Please.
from Taker 610. Thank you very much for the donation.
Thank you.
I guess this is the has really hammered. The IRA has really hammered Hyundai and Nissan
Hun
EVs. That would be
Mhm.
the Inflation Reduction Act.
Oh.
Um, well, yes, because the prospect of the act was to reward vehicles that were either manufactured in this country or they had to have a certain percentage of like their battery components and things like that were mined or manufactured here, and Hyundai and Nissan apparently are not meeting that criteria at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
And there was that little hiccup there, if you wanna call it that, with going that happened with
Yes,
Nissan as well, and it was very dramatic. He made his escape. I mean, in Japan, he was put in prison in solitary confinement for 130 days, and I know I'm getting off track, but fun fact, they said that this Nissan executive was making 5 times what the president of Toyota was making in the millions and millions of dollars. So point is, Nissan has had its share of problems.
and they do, and they will continue to. I agree that the old B210, gosh, I remember that vehicle so well, and their small pickups were all great. Never should have changed the name, and definitely should not have gone in with
Oh,
Renault. I will
okay.
tell you that when I first started at the Nissan store outside of Atlantic City, it was at that time it was Admiral Dotson at Route 9 in the Black Horse Pike in Pleasantville, New Jersey, and I was living in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, um, and I had a demo. And at that time, they had those small pickup trucks, and they had the King Cab,
The King
and I
Cab.
and I thought, okay, this will be fun to drive. So I took the King Cab as a demo, and I used to drive on the White Horse Pike, which is not a particularly nice road. And uh, every time I would hit a bump, my head would hit the ceiling, would hit the roof. It was like, oh my god, I was like this driving, and but it was such a cool looking car. Uh, or truck. I love the concept of it, but oh my goodness! And I'll share a quick story because, well, you know me, that's the kind of person I am.
Yeah, yeah.
So I remember that we we did a promotion, and we were selling cars for like 200 or $500 over invoice, and we had it painted on the windshields of cars, the amount of money over invoice, and then we we were changing the program, and somebody had scraped the amount of how much over invoice.
Off of
And
the
yes, and and I'll never forget this. The Press of Atlantic City, which was the local newspaper, they came in and they interviewed me, and they did a story about, the title of the story was "It Takes Two to Make a Trustworthy Transaction," because I was talking about how there has to be a little bit of trust involved in doing this. So they
Sure.
took a picture of me on the lot pointing to these line of pickup trucks, and all it said was over invoice. Didn't say how much. And it was like, yeah, we'll sell you any one of these trucks for over invoice. Just don't ask me how much over invoice.
That is the epitome of bad timing there, right?
It,
Oh my
it,
gosh, doing a
it,
story on trust, and
yes,
somebody came along and scratched off the numbers so that they all said over invoice, and you did
yes,
an interview.
yes. Yes, I'll never forget at that time you were allowed to smoke inside dealerships.
Can you
And
imagine?
I was a heavy smoker, and I had a cup of chamomile tea, and I'm puffing away, and the reporter said to me, she said, "It just seems so hectic and so challenging." She said, "Have you ever thought about leaving the car business?" And my response was, "You can leave your wife, but you can never leave the car business." Well, I was engaged to Suzanne, my wife at the time,
I'm sure she
and
loved that.
and she saw that line in
Oh,
the
yeah.
newspaper, and she was not pleased.
I can imagine that
Uh,
Suzanne was not pleased, and I would venture to say she let you know it too.
she did. I don't think she ever let me forget it. Uh, but that's a story for another day. I wanted to
Oh
talk
god.
about, believe it or not, an organization in Canada, and I'll share my screen again.
Okay. All right, Canada. We're gonna move to Canada here.
Well, we are, because we have a lot of Canadian
We
followers.
do. We really do in the community.
But
We do.
I thought this was really an interesting article. And the reason I think it's interesting is because it can be reflective of what we might see here in the States.
Okay.
Auto Canada, which is the largest publicly traded automobile group in Canada,
Mhm.
um, their net income plunged 79% on
Ooh.
used vehicle write-downs and floor plan costs. They still made money, just nowhere near to the degree
Ah,
that they had made it before. Now, what I thought was interesting about the article was the fact that they had used car write-downs, and I don't know. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I,
okay.
I don't know that we've ever really discussed write-downs.
Yeah,
But
if you could explain what used car write-downs, what is that?
what that means is, if a dealership bought vehicles, or a vehicle, for say for $40,000 when they bought it, either they traded it or they bought it at the sale, and they thought that was the correct wholesale market for that vehicle at the time,
Okay.
and when they traded it or bought it, and then the market crashed to a degree, and let's say its real value 30 days after they bought it was only $35,000. So what a lot of dealerships do is they'll take a look at their inventory, and they will adjust it to what the appropriate amount should be in
Mhm.
today's market. So if you're taking write downs of hundreds of millions of dollars, okay, for instance,
Okay.
this could impact a company like Carvana,
Uh-huh.
okay, who, as we know, buys high, because
Yep,
they
yep.
tend to want to pay more than the other retailers out there. Uh, if they buy high and they don't sell it quickly enough, traditionally what you would do is you would write down that inventory and bring it into what current market conditions are, so that um, what you can sell it. Because if you bought a vehicle for $40,000 and you
Mhm.
wanted to sell it for 44, but the wholesale value is only now 35, and the
Right.
retail value is only, say, 39. Well, you can't be sitting there trying to sell it for 44 if the real retail money on it's 39. So
Right.
you have to adjust the value of your inventory. You have to take that loss on paper.
Right.
And the other reason you have to do it is so that the salesperson is motivated enough to sell it, because if there's no profit in it and salespeople get paid a percentage of profit, what's in it for
How
them?
are they all those salespeople?
Yeah. Now,
So
I mean, I
then
know
you have a write down then.
yes. So you adjust your inventory to the current market conditions as to what it really is worth.
Mhm.
And so that's a common practice in a lot of dealerships. And I just thought it was fascinating that if the largest retailer in Canada has seen their wholesale floor planning costs, their costs
They're
to finance their cars
Mhm.
go up, and that the value of their cars has declined, that between that floor plan interest going up and having to write down the value of their remaining inventory, that's a huge,
That's
significant decrease.
it sure is.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking hundreds of millions of dollars there. And I would think that's going to happen here.
I would think so too with used vehicles, and I think I saw Igor saying the same thing in chat. Now
I,
here's an interesting thing I want to throw at you, Ray.
okay,
That's in this article that I kind of picked up on. Despite this is what they're saying. Despite the current challenges, Anthony said the company continues to move further into the used market in pursuit of growth. So they're leaning in. They're still leaning in to the used car market. And we see ourselves as being a hybrid of a lot of the largest auto retailers in the United States. We want a bunch of new car dealerships and a bunch of used car dealerships that both sell online and in stores. So, despite this, Ray,
there's the question that I would have loved to ask this gentleman is, when you say you're leaning into more used cars, are you being more cautious as to what you are willing to pay for, or how much you're willing to trade for these cars? In many cases at the auctions, I have seen some information where a lot of dealers are actually bidding over retail numbers in order to get some of these used cars. Well, if you're paying more than retail,
mhm,
what are you going to sell it for? I
I
mean, what
wonder.
yeah, what can you sell it for? I mean, so would it make more sense for dealerships to be more, I guess, conservative in
Mhm,
the amount of dollars they're willing to spend for cars? And I know part of the mindset is, well, if I don't buy this car,
yeah,
someone else will, and it's one less car that I'll have to sell. And so the herd mentality that happens is everybody just keeps overbidding because they're certain there won't be anything for them if they don't.
yeah,
Um, but
FOMO.
yeah, but what would happen if they just backed off and let those who want to overbid and you buy the rest? And even if the rest isn't as nice as what they're overbidding on,
Mhm,
my
mhm.
guess is the rest isn't costing you anywhere near what they're paying for the ones they're overbidding on. And even though you might have to do a little more reconditioning, you probably would end up in them better
Yeah.
than I'm just thinking.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you. And this is interesting with this certain company because they're also, besides leaning into the used car market, they're also expanding their presence in the collision center and vehicle repair business, which we know is a huge moneymaker,
Yes.
a big moneymaker, especially during this market and during these times whenever there are so many used vehicles on the road right now with, I don't know, they're older, higher mileage, they need repair. And as well as as a finance manager, I found this interesting that they just announced the acquisition of a company called DCC Hail, which is a paintless dent repair company specializing in hail damage
Mhm.
on vehicles. So they're really, I mean, they're making some they're growing. They're throwing a lot of money into expansion and growth.
Well, and trying to find additional streams of
Yes.
revenue, above and beyond just selling new and used cars, which makes sense. And to me, what made sense is that they looked at their inventory position and said, "We own it for way too much in comparison to market conditions, and let's just take the write-off." I mean, there's tax implications, there's savings there tax-wise
Mhm.
for doing that. I mean, it is a loss. Um, so you can use that against paying taxes in the future. And I just think I honestly believe that your large public groups in the states are doing the same things. Even a lot of them. I mean, the people that I worked for at the mini store, we every car that we traded or any car that we bought, there was, I want to say, an extra $500 that got attached to it, and it was for in case we had to write vehicles down, so that we built up this giant ass pot of
Uh-huh.
extra dollars that we could use to write down cars that we bought for too much or we sat on for too long, and we needed to lower the values of them in order to be able to sell them.
Interesting.
So I think a lot of the smarter dealers still do things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm projecting, but I think what we see out of Auto Canada is what we're going to see more and more dealer groups doing in the states.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting myself. Um,
And I'm going to share one more thing with you, and you haven't
okay.
seen this yet, but I just
Yeah.
it came in not too long ago. Excuse me. Share. And this is the Black Book data for this past week.
Okay.
Okay, and you haven't seen this, but wholesale prices have continued to go up dramatically. Now, I know Manheim has suggested that in February there was a 4.3% increase in
Increase.
wholesale values, which is a staggering amount
Yeah,
in 1 month.
it
You know,
is.
you extrapolate that out, that's 48% over the course of a year. We've seen that kind of happen 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And I would hope that we don't have a repeat of something like that. But you can see here the car segment
Share
went up
Can you share
almost
your
a half
screen?
a point, and the truck segment went up 0.3 of a point. The overall market went up 35 basis points, or 3.5,
Bits.
35 per, however you say it. But
Yeah.
my point is, if you look at the overall market historically, 2017 to 2019, in this week, there would actually have been a drop of that amount, so that a swing in the opposite direction of the same amount means that in comparison to what we had seen in 2017 and through 2019, it's a 0.7% increase in what we're seeing happening to wholesale values, and that's crazy,
Wha
staggering
It
numbers.
is. Why?
Dealers are bidding up these cars in a crazy fashion. I mean, literally paying retail numbers and over retail numbers in order to in order to get these vehicles. So I don't know if I
That
ever
is.
really shared the screen, so or stopped sharing here. So it's we're seeing the same type of situation we saw 2 years ago.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Which it should be the opposite right now.
Typically, it is. And yesterday I was having a email conversation with a good friend of the channel. What's the matter, you?
What's the
Um,
matter you?
and we were talking about the market, and when I was driving home yesterday, I was thinking to myself, I have never in my lifetime seen a used car market like what we're seeing today, or what we've seen for the past 3 years, for that matter. Um, and I always rely on historical data and
Mhm.
what's happened in the past, because I think that's typically a good guideline as to what's going to happen in the future. But as I admitted to What's the Matter You, um, I'm thinking that maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe what we're seeing, unfortunately, is the new normal.
Oh, man, I was afraid you were gonna say that. I was afraid you were gonna say new normal.
Well, I hope it's not, but
I do too, but doesn't it I often ask myself this very same question, right? I'm sure other people do too. Like, is this ever gonna I think the answer is no, it's not ever gonna go back, but geez, is it going to come back a little bit? Just a
well,
little bit?
I did hear from our dear friend Brandon at Car Questions Answered, um, that some of the dealers he knows, they are not seeing a spike in sales due to tax refund season the way they thought they would, which
Right,
was
right.
something that I had thought was going to happen. So if that continues to be the case, then maybe we'll see some of this craziness come to an end. If tax season sales are not nearly as robust as what dealers had expected, they will end up having extra cars that they paid too much money for, and they will be forced to lower the prices of them in order to get rid of them.
That's what I thought too. And I think we talked about this maybe a couple of Fridays ago about tax season. It's not going to be. It just isn't what you and I would have been used to, right?
Yes.
During this time, like, okay, it's time to ramp up. We've been through our January, February lull. But it's just not going to be that this year. So,
Yeah,
well,
I fear this could be the new normal. I hope it's not. I hope that maybe if tax season isn't as robust as people had hoped it would be, that will see uh, wholesale values and retail values inching
kind
backward.
of, yeah.
Yeah, I'm hopeful, but I don't know I am baffled and befuddled, based on 43 years in the business, of what I see going on, and I don't know how to explain it, and I don't know how to account for it. And
Yeah.
people I talk to that have spent years and years in the business feel the same way. It's like maybe we've just been around it too long, and we don't know what the business is anymore. I
Well,
don't know.
that's quite a thought, isn't it? That's quite a thought because that means that the next generation that goes into the business, well, it's just going to be nothing like what you and I grew up with as far as
Absolutely.
dealership world is concerned. But
I
yeah,
I like this from Igor Ray. It's going to go back quite a bit down. Trust me. I
trust me.
hope
Okay.
Igor. I hope you're right. I mean, that's what I would have thought, but I am just so baffled and befuddled by what we see
Hmm.
week in and week out at the auctions, and what's going on in the market, that it's so hard to tell. Believe it or not, Kimberly, I have
Yes,
another show I have to do in about
I know
15
you
minutes.
do. I know you do. You're gonna head on over to
Yes, because
CarEdge Electric.
CarEdge Electric, we're now on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So it's time for us to bid adieu to our friends
Yes.
here today, and those who want to see Justice and I having a conversation in about 15 minutes. Join us at CarEdge Electric. In the meantime, thank you, Kimberly, for co-hosting today.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
I believe my son will actually be back and joining us tomorrow. So we'll be back here tomorrow at noon with more news that you can use from CarEdge. Well, please join us then. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you guys. Have a good day.